NTzada, how are you doing today? Yeah, this show it's gonna be in English because we do have a special guest today. I know that you are used to Portuguese, but today is a special guest. I will have to do this in English. So don't forget to actually go here on the subtitles and actually activate the Portuguese if you don't understand English, and you can actually follow this show today here in YouTube. If you are on other podcast platforms, then you actually have to listen in English for this time, okay? So don't forget to actually click the like button, click the subscribe, and let all your friends that we are having a new podcast this week, okay? Okay, so Pod Joga is going to start, and today we do have one of my idols of this retro gaming collecting times. Yeah, as you know, I've been collecting for probably 12 years, and one of the guys who guided me a lot on this was this guest here. So not much more. I don't want to be extending myself. I need to call him. So uh, I have a pleasure to call today here John Hancock, the immortal John Hancock. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And I'm just happy that I'm helping fellow collectors along their journey. And like I said, honored to be on your channel.
No, thank you very much, John. As you know, I'm Brazilian, and when I moved to US, I was like, I need to know more about those local YouTubers and the local collectors. So I went crazy to YouTube and started to actually dig, and then for sure I found the Metal Jesus crew. Um, so everybody was there, but you definitely was one of the one that stand out more because of the huge collection that you have. And then I start to go to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, and then I saw your collection over there. So I was like, okay, this is the legend. This is the Immortal John Hancock. So again, it's a big pleasure to have you in the show.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, this audience is the majority in Portuguese, so I'm glad that I'm introducing you for probably the people who actually collect knows you, but for those who doesn't know, Immortal John Hancock is a big collector for a long time, and not just that, like he's in YouTube since 2006,
Yeah.
if I'm not wrong, correct?
Yeah. And that's a whole funny story. I'll happy to share how I got into YouTube, how that started, because wow, it's been a crazy ride. But yeah, I've been collecting a long time since the mid to late 90s. I was in high school, graduated high school in 94, but I was collecting games back then.
Nice.
And it just kind of snowballed and it just accumulated. I never really sold off much of what I had. A few times here and there, little stuff. My wife had a health scare, a medical issue, and I had to sell some of my collection early 2000s for that. But yeah, it's been a crazy ride, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that for sure. You are at the Pod Joga show, so Pod Joga means podcast plus play. So
Okay.
the start of the show is not me, it's not you, it's the game. So I ask for the guests to actually choose a game so I can put on the background when I'm editing this video. Do you have anything in mind? I probably guess where you go, but tell me what do you have in mind?
Have in mind, how about Ghouls and Ghosts for Sega Genesis?
That's a big one. That's awesome. Very popular, and I think people knows this game very well. So yeah, it's starting right now. You're gonna see that on the TV,
Okay.
and I'll start to play right away. John, comes to my attention that you do have about 32 US collections. Is that the right number, or you now have
34, but yeah, I mean,
okay.
that number kind of is around 30s. And so
Okay.
there's a lot of like people see that number. How do you do that many? Well, I collect a lot of obscure stuff as well. So not everything's a huge, large collection, but I have every North American, and I want to let your audience know I'm a North American collector primarily. So
Sure.
the majority of my collection is North American, as that's where I live and that's where I can find games. Typically, when I go around the United States, I go to many video game conventions now, and that's what you normally find, But so 34 complete North American collections. Some of them are fairly obscure and small, but there's some larger ones. Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo. Now, my Super Nintendo collection is not completely boxed. It's about a third of its boxed. N64, completely boxed. And my NES, which is probably most known for all but my stadium events, is boxed complete.
It is.
So I mean, I have large, and I have more obscure collections such as Vectrex, but I have a complete Sega Saturn US, including Daytona, the rare Daytona Circuit Edition. I have Sega Dreamcast, a loose Game Gear set, Sega CD 32X. I love Sega, so I'm a big Sega fan. I'm kind of known as the Sega collector, but really I collect lots of stuff. Atari, I'm really big into Atari. I have several Atari collections as well. Jaguar, Atari XEGS, Atari 5200, 7800. I have Nokia N-Gage complete set, Neo Geo Pocket Color US. Those are just some of my collections that I've collected over the years. I have other things as well. One of my more obscure collections, everything from like Ouya hardware. So I have an Ouya hardware collection. I got kind of really into that for whatever reason. And the list could go on and on. I could talk a long time about that and ramble. But I enjoy just games. I find value and enjoyment of just collecting video games, no matter what platform. I think there's a lot out there to discover, and unfortunately, the hardware is and software is getting harder to find physical copies of, and so that's really important that someone can collect that and share it with the public when they can.
That's a good call. Yeah, we know that the collecting time is actually getting some trouble right now. We're going to talk about that too. One curiosity that I have, where do you fit all these games in your house? Do you have like 2 game rooms or something like that?
Yeah, this is my studio, and so I was an instructor. I was a professor at a college for 5 years.
Nice.
And I taught intro to game development. I wasn't necessarily a programmer, but I had my students do Game Maker, and really, I got that job by an instructor had me talk to his class about video game history, and because I had an educational background, I was able to take over and teach a class, an introductory programming class. It was mostly video game history with a little bit of programming at Portland Community College for 5 years. And then so I used that money, I saved all that money up, and then did an expansion on my house from my studio.
That's nice. Okay, that makes total sense.
And a majority of my game collection's in another room. It's essentially a garage, like an insulated garage.
Got it. Okay. So, John, you have this passion of games, and my question is, how does that start? Like, what happened in the past that actually sparks that to you, and then you, as you said, you saved the games to today?
Oh, well, I come from a family of like hobbyists and collectors. So my dad was a hobbyist. My dad, he was not into video games, but he was into like canoeing, black powder rifle shooting. He was into like early American black powder rifles. He'd go to like meets. My dad was really a big guy too. He's like 6'6".
Oh, okay.
And so his job was in medical, so that his mountain man name was Big Medicine Man. Oh. And so but we did tomahawk throws and black powder rifle meets. He built his own redwood strip canoe, and he did some other cool things, but he was a hobbyist. He was into remote control airplanes. He was just into archery, traditional longbow, not compound like and so he actually shot a deer and hunted a deer with traditional longbow. But so we have like kind of a connection to my dad had a connection to we have family previous lineage that goes back to some Native American. Mm-hmm. And so my dad really connected with that. So that was important for him to get into traditional longbow shooting and that stuff. But anyways, my mom was a collector. So my dad was a hobbyist. My mom was a collector, into Coca-Cola. She was into porcelain dolls and going to yard sales and flea marts. And you know where this is going. Oh. So she would take me to these flea marts that we would have in the States. And typically on the weekends, we had in Redding, California, we had a place called Jolly Giant Flea Mart. I did a short on it on my channel. Huge indoor flea mart, and they would have everything there, clothes, you name any type of collectible, you could go there on the weekends and you could find stuff. I started getting into baseball cards. Cards went to comics. Comics went to action figures. But I kind of wanted to play with what I was collecting. And, the action figures just kind of stayed in the package. And I was just like, I couldn't interact with it as much as I wanted to. And so when I started collecting video games, I got hooked. It just was so much fun. I could find products fairly affordable. This is, mid 90s. And I was able to, on a college budget, a poor college budget, was able to start collecting games because I didn't know there was a bunch of other people doing this until a little bit later. I got connected to online forums and a video game journalist and was able to really introduce me to some obscure stuff. And that just took it off. I mean, that's when it was just the sky's the limit. And so I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it and traveled and pursued stuff on the West Coast, everything up to Oregon, down to Los Angeles on the West Coast, and got majority of my collection in that 90s to early aught time in those states of Oregon and California.
Got it. Do you still have like any item from your childhood that actually remains close to your heart?
Yes. We had a rental store in our town. I grew up in Cottonwood, California.
Got it.
And that's south of Redding. And we had a couple rental stores. And Bowman Video was like a very small rentals place. It had Nintendo, some Sega Master System, which I know probably was just bigger. Your fan base may when I say Master System, we're like, oh yeah, now we're talking. But Master System here in the States wasn't as popular, but this rental store had some. Because when Nintendo first came out, people didn't know rental stores, especially, were just playing the field. They had Master System and Nintendo, and eventually Nintendo was a lot more popular. But anyways, that's where I first saw Master System for the first time. I didn't rent it back in the day, but this place had some Master System. And when they went out of business, I got to go back and purchase some of the games that they were offering to rent Master System. Uh-huh. And so some of my Master System games have their rental sticker on the cartridges.
Pretty good. You do have like the complete set, right? For
Master System. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Yeah, no, tech toy is a big deal in Brazil, as you know, and because that's how we actually got access to the Master System, as Sega was actually working very close to this company in Brazil, so very we cool. Could actually have access. In Brazil, unfortunately, in the beginning of the 90s, all the how do I call this? The imports were closed, so you could not actually have anything from outside. So you have to produce internally, and then there was a good partnership between Tectoy and Sega. So
very cool.
Yeah, that's why it's a big deal. That Sega Master System was my first video game because of that, the passion and Tectoy and everything that they actually put in terms of ads and all this actually make that so big. Nintendo didn't have a shot because they actually had to clone. We had clones over there to actually represent Nintendo, as you know. So different mindset from US.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard just how beautiful a Brazilian gaming community is, and just how wonderful just games thrive with just the gaming community. I've heard from several people. I'd love to travel and visit there someday. It's just great to hear that, just the different cultures and what they experienced, and how games really is a crossover. So like I was a big Sega fan, and my experience with Master System was in the mid 90s when Toy Liquidators was offering a reduced cost Master System with the built-in game. So I had actually the Master System 2 was my first console. So
really?
Yeah. So that's how I got into it with some aftermarket, like refurbished Master System 1. Eventually I got both consoles. But yeah, that was my first experience was actually the Master System 2 line. And I got into it after Sega. So I actually experienced Sega Genesis before Master System. And so, yeah, it's pretty crazy collector
Yeah.
wise. And then I played my first Master System games on my power based converter on my Genesis.
Yeah, that's very common here to see
Mhm.
people playing Sega Genesis before the Sega Master System, because all this access to the Master System was not there. I have a question for you about that. So you are known by a Sega man, right?
I'm known as a Sega guy. Yep.
Yeah. Why Sega is so big in US, bigger than in Nintendo, at least on the 90s?
Gosh, I think I've always been drawn to like arcade style games,
Uh-huh.
and I really think that like the mid to late '80s had some fantastic arcade releases. Like you had
Mm.
better graphics, you could do more with games, and everything from Altered Beast. I think of Capcom, Ghouls and Ghosts. There's so many great, wonderful releases in the mid to late '80s. I experienced a lot of those games in the arcades. That was
Uh-huh.
when and I really just was drawn to 16-bit. Just I felt like it was a good balance of like fast gameplay with really nice graphics. And to me, the Genesis was I wanted to save up and get a Neo Geo, and I showed my dad one in a magazine. And my dad says, that's great. You see that lawnmower over there? That's how you're going to earn your video games. And so I worked really hard over a summer to save up money. And unfortunately, I didn't save up enough to get a Neo Geo, but I sure saved up enough to get an original Sega Genesis and with Altered Beast bundle. And I was the first one on the block to have one, and that was it. I mean, I was hooked. I played. I beat Altered Beast in a couple days, but that first couple years, I got some great games. Ghouls and Ghosts, Herzog's Vi. I got Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. I got all like the black grid base, all the like the classics. I got some of the better games, and it just like hit after hit. And then I could rent them. A lot of rental stores would rent them, so I'd rent a lot of games, and then um, it just stuck with it. So like to me, like the Sega Genesis had very consistent releases. They had a lot of releases. And when the Super Nintendo first came out, it took a while for that to like catch on. And so it wasn't until later that really it started to gain traction from with me, because I got one probably 93.
Got it.
I got one way after launch because I was still earning my own game systems and stuff, and it was expensive.
Yeah. No, I know. And again, I'm glad that you didn't get the Neo Geo, because I
No,
don't think you'll be enjoying so much as the Sega Genesis.
played it in the arcades. Loved the
Yeah.
Neo Geo,
Yeah.
Magician Lord, some of the early releases. But yeah, I was a big fan of Magician Lord, and Baseball Stars. Those
Good.
early
Uh-huh.
ones in the arcades. But yeah, that was how I was affording Neo Geos, 25 cents at a time.
John, how was the scenario of arcade in US at the time? Like, was big also? People were going to the places to actually play with friends. Was a community going there?
Yes.
Ah,
Yeah.
nice.
So my experience early on was I was a kid. So I have very fractured memories of this because of my age, because we're
Uh-huh.
talking 83. This is when we had kind of an arcade bust. So 83 was a bad year for video games in the
Sure.
US. And that's really when the bottom fell out and a lot of companies lost millions of dollars. But I remember going to a music store in a mall, and I remember seeing the biggest arcade, and I was a little kid, so my perspective is disoriented. Like it's not. I remember it just being huge. It probably was huge, but it was probably smaller than what I remember. But I remember two stories of arcade stuff, and they had all these crazy games. And I was the type of kid that would just go to the ones I liked. I would go to play Pac-Man and go play, things. And I was small. So 83, I was first grade.
Uh-huh.
So, I was probably I remember using a stool to play a lot of games. Like I couldn't see over the arcade setup.
The counter.
Mhm.
Pretty good. Yeah, no, that scenario in Brazil also was big. I remember a
Huge.
lot. Yeah, Xavier's, Street Fighter,
Yes.
and like
Yeah.
all this coming very, very, very big.
Street Fighter, definitely the resurgence.
Yep.
So like, there was like kind of two periods. There was like, it kind of diminished, but then mid to late 80s, Nintendo catching on, and there was a resurgence in arcades, and there was some fantastic games. I would say like a silver age of arcade stuff that came out, and that's to me what I remember more because I was older.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
I was, and I had a Sega Genesis at home, so like it was so neat to play some of the games, the home ports, and the Sega Genesis. Even though it wasn't a 1-to-1 arcade release, they had some great releases. Ghouls and Ghosts being one of the best home ports at the time of
Sure.
that game. So wonderful.
John, do you remember playing with friends like couch co-ops? Is that something that was actually popular in US?
Yes, absolutely. I had a older brother. He was 5 years older than me that lived with me. We didn't play a lot, but we played a game called Herzog's Vi, and you can play 2-player co-op, and it's kind of a real-time strategy game with robots that you can transform into a jet, and you can control an army, and your goal is to like take over bases and like send your army. You can't directly attack the other base of the other opponent. You have to like send your army of tanks and armored cars to go take out their base, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, Streets of Rage, Altered Beast, Golden Axe. Oh my gosh, Golden Axe, like to me, is up there for like great co-op. And so those are the types of games that I like to play. Those brawlers or arcade style games. And Genesis had a bunch of co-op, and it was just wonderful, just fun, great graphics too. So yeah, played a lot on Genesis co-op.
Nice. And then you said that in the college time, you actually start to collect more seriously, right?
Yes.
That actually motivated by what you learned from the past, but also because of the retro gaming scenario is starting to get more popular.
Yeah. So I thought I was just the only guy doing this in my area, and I
Really?
lived in a town, less than 100,000, but in Northern California, it was kind of known as a smaller rural area. My hometown was like 5,000 or less, and so I lived in a fairly small town. And so I was collecting at yard sales and flea marts, and mostly flea marts. I'd go a weekend, I'd take $20, and I would pick up games and I would add it to my collection. At the time, I had Odyssey 2, which is different things in different regions, but it was Atari 2600,
Sure.
Nintendo, Sega, Super Nintendo. That was kind of my, at the time. Later in the 90s, I got PlayStation, and so I was adding games to that. And then, but that at the start, it was Odyssey 2 and Nintendo and Atari. And that was like on a little bit of Sega. So what happened was I found the online community, Digipress being one of the forums I went to, Atari Age later. And then I found out about a game convention in the early aughts that was just for collectors in Vegas called the Classic Gaming Expo. And that really skyrocketed after my collection skyrocketed after that. But in the early days, there was a guy called Mike Etler, and he made an NES rarity guide, and I used that to collect my NES collection. And so I went to a store called Funko Land, which was bought eventually by GameStop. And that's how I added games to my collection. I would use his, and all he had was lettered rarity on each cart. So that's A, how I knew what games were out there for NES, and B, how rare they were. So I just try to go after the rare games that I could afford. And so that's how that kind of my game collection exploded after that.
That's a very good strategy. Yeah. And at the time, the internet was not so popular, right? So people was not posting much.
Yeah. I mean, and I was just more or less using I was using forums, but I wasn't really scouring using eBay. Like eBay was kind of in its infancy. Eventually I would use eBay a little bit more, but I more or less was collecting in person because I found you would go to in person and people weren't using the internet for prices. So they were just offloading this junk video game stuff. And a lot of times, I was getting large amounts of games, a couple dollars a piece. Yep. And, and then I would just trade the extras to get the games I want, or bring them to Funko Land, all the staff knew me there. I had my own drawer. I had my own drawer. It said John's NES drawer. And so they would get new games in, and they had an updated list of what I was missing, and they would take the games I was missing and put them in there.
That's amazing.
It's
Fantastic.
pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It wouldn't happen
Different times.
Yeah, different times.
Yeah. No, I was talking with another friend, and I was like, I don't know if I could start any collection today. I think it's gonna be so hard and so expensive in comparison to your time, like when you were started. I can imagine you looking for that and seeing how crazy these times now.
Yeah, it's a different time, and it's unfortunate because prices do have impacted a lot of collectors. I think a lot of collectors are collecting less because it's so expensive. And so I think you can still collect and you can still make it fun, but it's different. And I'm aware of that. I wouldn't have what I have if I started now. It'd be totally different. I'd probably go multi-cart and try to maybe go original hardware and maybe compromise. But between the games and the hardware, some of the stuff is so expensive now. It's unfortunate. I mean, it's hard to find, but the market, determines price, and we'll see. I think as time goes on, collecting will change and evolve, and for better and worse. It's always moving and changing.
Do you think it's getting down the prices today? How you feel about the prices now? Because I know it's always fluctuating, right? But do you see now going to, I don't know, descending or something like that?
Yeah, I think they're gonna definitely stabilize.
Yeah.
I think that high prices, the high COVID prices aren't going to stay. I think right now the economy is kind of up in the air worldwide. I mean, we got a lot of questions about moving forward with that.
Correct.
I think there's going to be more and more collectors that say, I don't need all this stuff, so I want to offload. I think there'll be other people that want to buy it, but I think eventually we're going to have a saturated market where we'll have, what does the new collector want? As time goes on, there's going to be less people that want that old Atari stuff and that old cartridge stuff, and they're going to want stuff newer, like Switch, disc-based stuff, 360, PS3. There's always going to be collectors. There's always going to be people that want that old stuff, but I think the majority of the public, some of them have already moved on from collecting. I mean, even just looking at my own videos that I post, some of my most popular videos are emulation boxes. And so people are looking at that because collecting in general is so expensive. Also, it takes up so much space. You can take this entire game collection and you can put it in a little box now and enjoy. If you just want a game, it's not one-to-one the same, but for most people it's good enough.
Yeah. No, the multi-cart is another one that you just mentioned, and that's happening a lot in Brazil also. People are collecting more the hardware and actually having the games on the multi-cart, so they don't have to actually think about that. So
and you don't have to get up. You can just click a button, go to the menu, play your game, and enjoy it.
It's pretty good.
At the end of the day, it's just about having fun and playing games. Playing games multiplayer with friends or just enjoying it. And I miss those days. When I had unlimited time where I could play games and stay up late, and not have responsibilities and adulting.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Yeah. My daughter is turning 19 now. She's like, I'm adulting. And I was like, yeah, you are. Now you have another responsibilities. Yeah,
2 kids myself, one 13 and 14, so daughter and son. And I mean, daughter's starting softball, so got softball practice. Gonna excited about practicing with her and playing catch and stuff, but that's less time for everything.
How do they feel about your collection, John? Like my kids, like, I love your game room. They bring people here and I let them play because, as you just said, this is about playing games. It's not nothing else. It's about having fun. So what's for you? How they feel about your collection?
It's pretty interesting. I think I've taught them that there's stuff you can play and stuff that's a collectible that you don't touch.
Okay.
And so they're very respectful of it. They play their own games. So to them, a fun game with something on the PS5 or something, my daughter loves the new wrestling games. So, I mean, it's to them, it's just not, they might play Pac-Man or they might play one of my arcade 1-up games. But that's about it. They look at it as stuff. you know.
Got it. Got it.
My daughter, my daughter's autistic, and so everything's very black and white. So she come up to me and she's like, "So when are your games leaving the house?" Because she wants to get a bigger house. She wants to get a bigger house, and like
For
it's
sure.
very like, oh, I don't care about that stuff. I care about getting a bigger house. When are the games going?
Makes
So,
sense, right? Yeah, no. No, yeah. And again, do you allow them to play with friends also or no? Like depends on the things you said, right?
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm careful who I show my collection to,
Yeah.
and you know, our neighborhood is pretty tight, where
Okay.
everybody watches one another, you know, and
That's
security
nice.
is pretty good here.
Uh-huh.
So, I'm not worried about that per se, but like, and they know that they don't invite a bunch of people over all the
Got it.
time. My son has some pretty close friends that he's been friends with years, and I trust them. I mean,
Yeah.
they're good kids. And my daughter, same thing. She's got a handful of friends that we've known for a long time. So I don't worry about that. They want to play a game or something, that's fine. Just ask me.
Nice, nice. John, you started your YouTube game channel in 2006. What was the motivation for that?
Oh man. Okay, so this is a very very fun story to share. A lot
Sure.
of people don't know, and so I really started off not wanting to do a YouTube channel. I know YouTube started and like, hey, why don't you do a YouTube channel? And I was hesitant just because I didn't have any background with film editing or any of that.
Got it.
And so, but I wanted to share my love and passion of video games with people. So what I started with before 2006 was the nuts and bolts to video game collecting DVD guides. And these, it's
Mm,
painful for me to watch them now because I didn't have a tripod, and it was just very early 2000 technology. I had a Fujifilm camera, and I mean, using Windows, I was using gosh, I don't know, one Windows DVD maker, Windows Movie Maker, I think was a program.
Oh
And
my gosh, I
so
remember that. Yeah.
I made those, and I would sell those at Classic Gaming Expo just for scratch money, just for like, you know, a little bit extra game money. Well, that kind of sparked interest. People wanted me to do different volumes, and I ended up doing like 8 or 9 different versions of that DVD series. It got to the point where it was more money to make them than what I was selling them at. And like then there was scratch. I had used paper labels, so everything was like it did, you know, label would skip or something. Then would have to replace. You know, I sold about 500 copies, I would say, over a period of early 2000s.
Got
So
it.
2005 to like I don't know 2009, 2010. But what I did was that was like what I sold at shows just for video games money. So that those were some of my early videos that I put on my channel. I would take the DVD video and just upload it.
Right there.
And then I
Nice.
just started doing some extra stuff. My first video actually was just how big my Atom box, how big is an Atom computer box, was my very first video.
Got it.
And at first I wasn't uploading all the time, maybe, you know, a couple a year, then it turned into a one a month, then it turned into every week. And then by 2015 is really when I was starting a very serious, not a serious channel, hobbyist channel, but like I was uploading all the time. And so then I still didn't really get it till a couple years later. And then now it's where I'm at. You know, I still keep it hobbyist, but 3 videos a week. I do 3 videos a week, did 3 videos a week every week during COVID. A lot of people thank me for that.
Yep.
And I just was very consistent on uploading content that I wanted to do. Everything from product reviews to just gaming to weird collectible stuff. I keep it different, you know, and I keep it different for myself just to keep motivated to do it. Just have a TurboGrafx 16 video tomorrow that I'm going to upload
Nice.
at the time of this recording. And just, I try to keep it mixed up. And then Jaguar, I got a Jaguar video plan, and I got just mix it up. And I like that. I like that I can just jump around and cover so many things that some people may not be able to have access to. I can just go in my game archive and dig a box out and hook it up to a capture card or show video, and that's kind of fun.
Yeah, what I like the most in your videos, you go straight to the point
Yeah.
and you don't have any background music, nothing like that. So
Sometimes.
it's really about, yeah, sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's really about the content that you are providing to the public. So it's very nice.
Thank you. I'm a straight shooter.
Yeah.
I don't I tell I'm a teacher by day, and I tell my parents
Yeah.
I use this term. I don't dance. I'm very direct communicator. If I have an
Good.
issue, I'll just say it. Um, I love the short format of YouTube just because I think I'm starting to like that more because you have to be to the point. You can't do fluff. And I'm just that type of person. I'm not a real wordy person. I get to the point and get to it. And I don't have just some large vocabulary. I'm just an average guy with a very unusual collection.
No, very nice. And now you're part of a crew, right? So I mentioned that in the beginning. So you have your friends, Metal
Yeah.
Jesus,
Mhm.
John Riggs. So how does that happen? Right? Is this a community that happened when you actually were starting, or because of the events and the fairs that you go, you actually get together more?
That's a good question. So think of it like a band. Okay,
Okay.
think of it like I got involved with organizing game shows before YouTube.
Hmm.
And so I started there, but I really was on the radar because of my game collection. So a couple of YouTubers reached out, Happy Console Gamer, Gamester 81, and Metal Jesus, because I had a crazy amount of games and that was content for them to cover on their channel. Gamester 81 was the one that really kind of showcased my collection on YouTube. But before then, my game collection was featured in some magazines. Tips and Tricks magazine, I think January '03. There's a couple indie magazines that showed my collection as well, and that kind of put me on the radar of like a game collector. And um, so that put me on the map. Then I was on some YouTube channels, and then those were the people like you got to do your own YouTube channel. I was a guest on some channels, mostly Metal Jesus, and eventually I did my own channel. And so it's kind of like a band, and then the band members decide to do their own solo work, and that's kind of where we're at. We're still friends. I just had lunch with Metal Jesus this last week at SideQuest Expo, and so we still stay friends. I'm not on his channel that much. We're planning some future videos together. I don't know when. We're very busy, and we don't live very close. A lot of people think I'm in Seattle. I'm actually hours away, so
Yeah.
it makes it tough to meet up, especially with my busy schedule.
Yeah, the reason I ask you is because again, it's nice to see how friends you are.
Yeah,
And as I said, I was watching all the videos, so I was trying to learn as much as I could how to collect at the time, right?
yeah,
But now that I am doing mine videos and I actually have my own friends upcoming, so I was like, okay, this is happening naturally, organically.
yeah.
Those people start to actually get together and starting to make a community about it. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to be positive and help other. I've helped several other smaller channels and YouTubes and interviews and stuff, and I try to do it if I have time. Um, I've had some crazy stuff personally. I've had to deal with my family, not me individually, but I've had some
Uh-huh.
crazy things this last year that I've had to navigate. But I still think it's important to give back to the community, content creators, and collaborate and help them. And I try to do that as much as I can. And I've helped several other channels out um, as I've had help along my way. And there's mistakes I've made along the way, and I've tried to learn from them and just try to keep it positive and uh, and contribute back.
Now I'm glad you said that because again, we are all humans, right? So you do have your family to take care of,
Yeah,
and sometimes people actually ask you for more and charge for more and all this, but you do have to do your own thing. So I'm glad you say that because that humanize a lot this conversation, you know.
absolutely.
Yeah. John, I met you a lot on those events, right? So Portland Retro Gaming Expo is
Yeah.
my favorite,
Oh yeah.
just because I used to live there. So I've been there since 2014, and again, I start my collection early. So it was part of my collecting world actually going to those events. Now I'm going to others in different parts
Awesome.
of US. It's amazing to see it.
Oh yeah.
How you feel about those events? Like, do you still enjoy to be there? Because every time that I go, you have something different to show people, right?
Yeah, you got to keep it fresh. I love the different regions have different games, and I think that's really important. I'm really glad you brought that up because I think, at least in the United States, I don't know how it is in Brazil, but different regions had different types of games to offer. And so when I go to different shows around the United States, there's a different flavor, as I would say.
Uh-huh.
You go back to the east, like in Ohio, I'm going to Korg's, and it's known to be like the old timers game show where it's got a lot of Atari, and I'm really excited about seeing that. Some of that stuff in my area is pretty hard to get now. Or you go to East Coast, and they had some distribution centers for Neo Geo and Lynx and some other. You'll see different supplies of games, and so I enjoy that every show in a different region has kind of a different spin. And yeah, I so going to a show, I'm amazed on. I like to go to different areas just to see that. I love going to Canada, seeing all the variations of packaging and stuff. I mean, I would love to go to Europe someday. You know, fingers crossed. Hopefully, that's a dream of mine to go to Europe for a game show. I'd be like win the lottery. That'd
And
be
it's
amazing.
huge, those events over there. They love it.
Yeah, I'd
Mainly
love to
in
go there
UK,
someday.
right? Yeah. Yeah, and in Brazil, as you asked it, so Canal 3, that means Channel 3, and RetroCon. This is a new one that it's upcoming, made by Casa do Videogame. That means Video Games House. It's a big store over there in Brazil. So they're bringing this energy now for the collectors in Brazil, and it's happening in São Paulo, happening in Rio de Janeiro. So these events is actually getting more popular. I
Awesome.
think we're learning a lot from what's happening here in US. I think it's probably the mecca of it, let's say that. But also in Europe, as you said, there is
Yeah,
some good ones over there.
and Brazil. I
Yep.
mean, like I said, it's gaming is universal.
Yep.
I think we could solve a lot of problems if we just get some friends together and let's just figure it out. Let's get along and we'll play some games. And that's what I did with my roommate back in college days. We would debate and we would settle it by playing Tekken 3.
Oh, really?
We would 100 matches. Who won 100 matches?
Amazing. Oh my
Yep. And then
gosh.
whoever won, you couldn't bring up that debate again. If you beat out of 100 matches, that was it. You beat someone fairly out of 100 matches,
Done.
done.
That's a very good way to put it. I love it. Tekken 3, there was a Brazilian character that used to play capoeira. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
remember the name.
oh yeah.
That guy was
No,
amazing.
played. I'm mostly a Paul Phoenix guy, but I played.
Yeah.
I played that the gentleman in that character. I forget his name.
Yeah.
Is it Eddie?
Eddie Gordo.
He was fun. 60 frames too. It was so beautiful to fight with him
To
because
find
he
that.
would just
Yes.
you could juggle characters, and I had a lot of fun. Played a lot of Paul Phoenix. I was mostly a Paul Phoenix guy.
Paul Phoenix. Yeah, that was a good
And
one.
I could juggle characters, and it was fun. I just really enjoyed that game. Played that game a lot
Yeah.
on the PlayStation.
PlayStation 1. Yeah.
Yeah, until our console started having lens issues. We'd have to flip our console upside down because we
Yes.
had one of the early release PlayStations. And
I did that too. Oh my
oh yeah,
gosh. That's
yeah.
classic. John, how do you feel about this 9th generation? It's a lot of things going on. I know that's probably not your motto, but how do you
Oh,
feel about the video game going to that direction?
well, I think there's it's kind of twofold. So like I have all the modern consoles. I have a Xbox Series X. I have a PlayStation 5. I have a PSVR
Oh,
2. I
you
have a
do?
Steam Deck, Playdate, Switch, and I think I like I like the graphics. I like the gameplay. I do worry about preservation.
Mhm.
Even just thinking about the Wii U and the 3DS right on the eve of being shut down. Um, I wish that home consoles would take a nod to like platforms such as Steam that offer something that's just a little bit, it's just there. Like I'm just sad. Um, but I think they have a lot to offer. I think that the Switch definitely has demonstrated that gaming is very alive and well in the world,
Yep.
and I think that platforms. I played Diablo 4 beta, so I did check that out.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to be hopefully getting level 20 this next weekend. Played as much as I could, just
Amazing.
juggling lots of things. Beautiful game. But yeah, so I like it, but I worry about like game preservation just because there's just going to be, it's going to be so much harder these days for these games to be saved. And so that's it. I mean, while I embrace digital gaming just to experience games, I think there's just that question mark of like, is there something that's going to be lost because these platforms aren't around forever now?
Uh-huh.
And so it's fun and it's great, but I wish there was like a way where they could be saved. And I think there's going to be people that are going to work on that. Um, but I still worry about it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, the physical releases, are they physical? In the end of the day, you actually have to download everything.
Yeah,
So I don't know about the future about on the collection. The collection part probably is going to be very affected for sure.
yeah,
But the games will probably remain in this
yeah,
cloud,
yeah.
and that's how it is, right? That's probably the way that we are going to.
Yeah, until a company pulls a plug and then you can't play them anymore. I mean,
Done.
it's tough.
Yeah.
It's a tough kind of place to be. And then it's just, I think gaming has become more in the now
Yep.
and temporary versus long term, where like, I can reach over here and I have, my behind this blanket here, I have an old Atari card, right?
See?
This Atari, and like here's surrounded. And so this game is old and I could play it anytime I want. I don't need to be connected to the internet.
Correct.
And, if I want to give it to a friend, here you go. I could hand this cartridge to a friend. They play it. There's no access code or, it doesn't check that it's my console's online all the time. And that's where we're at. We're at that stage, and that's going to impact. When a server goes offline, that's going to be the game over for some games.
Yep. And we're never gonna play again. That's so crazy. Yeah. John, but you do something that I like a lot, and that's my dream in the future, to have a homebrew. Like you
Oh,
do have your own games. And I
okay.
actually bought one of you. I
Oh,
remember last on the last event. So, how do you feel about that? Like creating your game is actually putting your signature in something that, when you were a child, probably was your dream, right?
yeah. I think I was inspired even by doing a college class of making these simple games.
Yep.
And there's so many talented programmers. Now, I wasn't a programmer for my game, but I had a say on it. Like
Sure.
I worked with the programmer and the gameplay style and even a new Genesis game, Block'em Sock'em, a puzzle game. And yeah, it's a dream come true, to be honest.
Yep.
And it's fun to be part of fun little projects. I've been doing homebrews and aftermarket stuff for charity work for many years, and then now I'm like essentially collecting games that I've been involved with and looking for others to partner up with to make some memorable moments. And it's been a lot of fun. And I think that is the future bright spot of classic games and gaming, because I think there's a great independent community out there of games in general. And they want to make these old games for new games for old consoles. And it's sky's the limit. I mean, there's just some crazy stuff being made for even Atari and Sega. And Genesis has got a pretty good homebrew community as well as NES. And I'd like to see some more Master System, of course,
Yep.
but yeah, for sure, I'm excited about being part of that and looking forward to doing more projects.
Yeah, Dreamcast also is so crazy how
Dreamcast, my
the
bad.
library, yeah, actually is amazing.
Yeah,
No, that's funny. I will, yeah, just so you know, I'll be on the next Portland Retro Gaming Expo. So I will actually bring some of the tech toy stuff that I have.
very cool.
And yeah, and I will we start to actually do this way. And I I can't wait to see everybody. That's going to be amazing interaction also again.
That's awesome.
John, how people can find you on internet? Do you ship abroad your games also? Where they can see your collection or your games? How do you actually show that to the public?
So yeah, John Hancock Retro is like my YouTube
Okay.
handle. You just type in John Hancock, you'll see my face. Twitter, at SW11ist, which is an old username of mine. And I'm on Instagram, the Immortal John Hancock, TikTok, but I'm mostly on YouTube with a little bit of Facebook and Instagram. And so, as for my games, they're made in such small quantities. People don't realize, so homebrew and aftermarket games are sold in the dozens, and so unfortunately, I'm not offering. I offer to run online, but they're made in such small batches of 50.
Okay.
And my Atari games are made in small batches of like a couple dozen. And so
Okay.
part of it is finding the cartridges. There is 3D printed cartridges, but they're kind of expensive still.
Yep.
And so I typically just use beat up carts with messed up labels that nobody's going to miss. So mostly I do them in conventions. And so my convention schedule is on my Facebook or my Twitter. I'll post what conventions. I'm coming to Midwest Gaming Classic next at the end of the month. And I'm going to be at Korg's in Ohio. And I'm excited about that. Those are some of my next events that I'm going to be at. And so that Korg's is in May and Midwest Gaming Classic end of the month. So I'm going to have several other conventions in the United States announcing me. And so PRGE is another one. I'll have them in person. So mostly some of my stuff in person. As for my game collection stuff, I'm going to probably have a different collection at PRGE to share in person in the display section. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, John always has all the collections in one room for people to see it. So I remember to see N64. I remember to see Sega Genesis, Game Boy. Yeah,
Game Boy wasn't mine.
Okay, what's
so
okay.
I share that space with some other people, the Video Game History Foundation.
Okay.
And then Sega Saturn Shiro. So Kay is a good friend of mine, and he was teamed up with Sega Saturn Shiro, and they had a crazy Sega room with Saturn, and it was just beautiful.
Yeah.
And so it was nice to see that. But yeah, I want to bring some other collections to PRGE to show them off in person. Time will tell. I proposed a collection to bring. Maybe not as big as some previous collections, but definitely going to bring something. It'll be fun.
Yeah, NES. I remember. I said Game Boy, but I think NES you had it.
Yes,
yeah.
NES.
Mm-hmm. Yes. John, should we finish our show? If a person wants to actually start to collect today, what's the tips that you can give to them?
Well, I always will say collect with what you love and collect with what you remember. So if you grew up with maybe a PlayStation or a Game Boy or a DS or a Wii or something, or older if you're an older gamer, but I think newer gamers are growing up with more modern consoles, and so start with the things that because I think you're going to get a lot of value out of nostalgia of like just going back to those games you played as a kid or earlier in your life. Yep. And then branch out from there. But collect with what you love. Okay. Don't collect with what you think is like, I would say don't do it because someone else is doing it. Do it because you remember having enjoyment from it. And I would say get with a group of people to enjoy it with. And so whether it's a community or a convention or friends, and that makes it to me like I had friends that I collected with, and that made it more enjoyable. And so, sharing those stories and passionate, and make it fun. Just keep it fun. I think when people get stressed out over money or rarity, they get wrapped up into condition. Just have fun. Do it because you want to do it, and don't just play a game because someone else told you it was great. Do it because you checked it out and you liked it.
That's an amazing tip. Yeah. That's the best way for you to actually enjoy what you have, right? Yeah. I like that, John.
Thank you.
I hope to have you someday on the Retromania here in Colorado, because it's getting bigger. For sure, it's small today, but that'll be amazing to have you someday.
Love to come to Colorado.
Yeah,
absolutely. Got a little map, just to let you know. I'm keeping track of all the states. I want to hit all 50 states and do a game convention in every state. So and abroad. So
yes.
I would love to go to every state and see the beautiful culture and community that people have. And that sounds awesome.
Yeah, Brazil will actually have the open arms for you also over there. That'll be amazing.
I'd love that. That would be great.
Yeah. John, thanks again. This is a pleasure to have you in the show. I mean, this is definitely one of the top shows that I want to do in my life, to talk to you and actually have this chat about video game for a person that I actually been following for a long time. Actually helped me a lot to get what I have. So again, thank you very much for your participation.
It was an honor. I had a great conversation with you, and I wish you nothing but the best with your journey. And you got a great passion. I know that.
Yeah.
And just spreading that cheer and goodness with others. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, John. É isso aí, NTzada. We are finishing our show here today in English, and we have a huge guest here with us. So again, as I said, thank you very much for all the participation and everything that you could share with us here, John. Was amazing to have you. Don't forget, people, to actually go like the video, subscribe, share with your friends. Make sure that this video can go to more and more people, and we can actually help the NTGames channel to actually grow more and more. Every time that I finish the show, people who doesn't actually follow this, I finish with a phrase in Portuguese that means play video game, called Jogue Videogame. And I want to actually ask John to finalize the show for me. That's the first time that I ask for a guest to finish this show for me. So it's going to be an honor to have John saying that. Remember, Joe, it's Jogue Videogame, okay?
Jogue Videogame.
Thank you, John. Bye-bye.